Okay, so I wanted to talk about, I guess, advanced dynamic linking workflow methods for Premiere and After Effects and how to best accomplish that. This is not comprehensive or any of that stuff. This is just my workflow and this is how I've developed it. So there's my caveat. Typically when I'm working on a client piece, there is some sort of a script. So I've written out just a really basic script here. It's nonsensical, it doesn't matter, it's fine. So this is what we receive from the client. We would assumedly have a general idea of who the audience is, where it's being played, if it's at an event or on social media, and we'd want to have a general idea of the mood and the theme, energy, all of that good stuff. So a place to start, once you have the script, is, and you know all those things, music first is really essential. That's going to be key in this process. And so finding a good music track that fits the piece and the mood and all of that stuff is really important. So I just went onto Artlist because I have a subscription there. I found this song. It's very trailery. You want to start there because that's going to be the underlying tone that kind of sets the pace for everything else. I just have this set up as like this would be just kind of a version 1 maybe that you would have going. But let's talk about how to kind of set this up. Now there's 2 ways, and I've done this both ways. One way is to set up the text in Premiere. So you'd, do something like this, and you'd line up all the text where you want it here in Premiere, and then kind of time it out first. That's a fine way to do it. Sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. I would recommend not going this route. I would recommend starting in After Effects, and some of that will make a little bit more sense later on. You won't have all of this. You'll need to create all this, right? But create a new composition, have it how you like. I would say each one of these lines, it's helpful if they're numbered just as a starting point to get you going. And so okay, there's roughly gonna be 9 shots in this. If you wanna break it down further, you could do that if you wanted to. I usually do that just later on. I usually structure it out how the client's given it, and then I kind of make creative adjustments after we kind of have a general idea of what it's looking like. So back in After Effects, create your composition. Let's do 01 this summer. This will just help you keep you organized, right? And go in here, change your colors, you line it up where you want it to be, change your text size. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you kind of get things right in this kind of first composition. Let's say we want this to be exactly 110. That seems fine. And I just have a reposition anchor point just so I can center that to the center. That way when I scale, we're scaling from the center. Once you have that, make sure that your composition is good and long. This doesn't need to be 15 seconds, but it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect anything, and it's always easier to have extra room. Anyway, so you go through and you'll duplicate these, and you'll just rename them. This is going to be a little bit of the tedious part of the process, but that's fine because the better you set it up now and the more time you take now, the kind of easier it'll be a little bit later on. So this would be here, copy this, go back to After Effects, get this, and you kind of make this happen any way that you wanted. But that's just kind of the general idea. I get all my text put in, all of my compositions. I have them in a folder called Edit 1. And so then it'll look like this. And you can do some creative adjustments. Like this one, it's kind of pushing the borders. So maybe I'd want to do 2 lines, or maybe I'd split it up into 2 scenes. You could go partway into this composition, Command-Shift-D, and then just change the lines and have it switch partway through. That doesn't really matter right now. Then what you're gonna do, once you have all this and you're ready to take it in Premiere, you open up Premiere and you'll want to have a folder for it to go into. I always just have a folder called dynamic link. All right, new folder. We'll just call this, I don't know, version 1 dynamic. Okay, open up Media Browser. Media Browser is going to be super helpful in doing this. You don't want to import, you don't want to do Command I, none of that stuff. Once you find where your footage is stored, double click on your After Effects project file and go here. And you can then select all of these and bring them into your project. Now, this works just like footage. You can bring it into your timeline, lengthen, shorten, but it's going to be capped at the length by how long your composition is in After Effects. So that's one of the reasons that it's easier to make it extra long, because otherwise you have to go back into After Effects and change the length of the composition, which is fine, but it's just a little bit more work. Depending on what your client expects, this may be good as a initial draft to be, hey, here's the music, here's kind of the general pacing, or they might want something a little bit more, and you might want to present something a little bit more to kind of give a better idea of, hey, this is the animation style that we're going for. This is the part where your creative freedom is free to reign, and you can animate this however you want. We're not going to be talking about animation in this. This is just workflow from Premiere to After Effects, right? Okay, so let's say that right here we wanted this to scale up and transition into the next text shot. But when you do Edit Original, it doesn't jump the playhead to where the animation or the corresponding part in After Effects. This has been my bane for years and years, and I recently discovered this trick. If you open up the info panel, this has always been a window that I've always closed and have never had any use for. And then it occurred to me the other day that this is what it would do, and it does, in fact. So you have here the different video tracks. I currently have 7, and it'll give you information on all 7 of those video tracks. On video track 5, I have this clip. And if I select it, I'm sorry, there's a lot going on. Let's right here we're at the 4-second mark. So that's what's displayed here at the current. That shows us how far into the sequence we are. So that'll be seconds and frames and minutes and all that stuff. However, you can see that these other numbers are changing. What's happening there is it's taking the relative position of the clip and showing you start to end of that clip how long it is. So you can see it's video 1, we're at 0, and then it starts counting up as we go through, and we can see that is 2 seconds and 23 frames long. So then we know that this last frame of this clip is at 2 seconds, 23 frames. We can go into After Effects, and at 2:23 right there, that's going to be the last frame that we see in Premiere. So we can work backwards from there and do any animation this way. Keyframe here, last keyframe over here. Insanely useful tool. That'll help you a lot when timing out precise animation for exactly where you want things to be. That'll be insanely useful. Okay, so you'll see that when I open up the Edit Original, it takes me into this pre-comp here. That's what happens when you create text first in Premiere and then open it up in After Effects. So if I make a new text here, and then I say replace with After Effects composition, that's going to take it into here. Here's my pre-comp. I can go into the new text, and there's my text layer. It's a little bit funky, and that's going to be these 2 things here. And it obviously it's not organized whatsoever. So then you have to go in, relabel it, and reorganize it how you see it. And that's why I have this archive folder and these others, because these are my text layers here, but these are those pre-comps. So it's not a difficult thing to have to deal with. You just have to be aware and be on top of it. Otherwise, you're going to have a folder that is just insanely messy and you're not going to be able to find anything. And that's why it's easier to start with After Effects, because you don't get that stuff going on. If you're just trying to get the edit out on paper, sometimes it's just easier just to kind of dive into Premiere, put your text layers out, put your music out, and all of that stuff. The next thing that would happen is, let's say you do animation on this and you're happy with kind of how it looks. You deliver it to your client and you get feedback. Okay, well, what do we do about version 2? Never, ever edit on your first version in case that you may have to go back and draw something from it. Maybe you're going to create a duplicate sequence, as maybe you normally would. We're going to call it version 2. Now, both these versions, version 1 and 2, are both referencing the same dynamic linked footage in After Effects. So we have to change that. And it works backwards than how you normally would do it. So this is fine. This is going to be our new version. That's great. That's perfect. When we go into After Effects, this sequence is going to become the new one, and the duplicated version is going to become version 1. So I have a tool called TrueComp Duplicator. This is on AE Scripts. I don't have anything to do with them. It's just legitimately a really useful tool, and it's one of the most useful tools in terms of time saving, because I'm going to open up a composition here. This is that main comp. I'm going to open that composition up. That's right here. Okay, and this is version 2, right? So I would want it to open up version 2 of that first shot that we had, right? So then I'm going to go into here, but the composition that it's referencing is the version 1. All of these compositions are still referencing these compositions. So just duplicating it doesn't work. So if I needed to do it manually, I'd have to go into here, then select this composition. And if I hit Option while I'm hovering over it, it'll replace it, right? So then this one's going to, now it's going to reference this one correctly. But you'd have to do that manually for this one. You can see how if you had 30 compositions, that's just going to take some time. And in there, mistakes can happen. So with TrueComp Duplicator, I don't want this docked, it will do all of that work for you. And again, I'm not pitching this. I'm just saying this is a tool that is extremely useful. So I'm going to call this version 1 because we want the duplicated version to be the old version. So I'm going to have the suffix be version 1. I'm going to have this be MoGraph project version 1. And then update expressions is fine. Select duplicates, that's cool. And then I want it to just be these. Unfortunately, you can't just grab the project. If I do that, it has issues. So you select all of these. Oh no, I want to delete that one. We want to be duplicated this bit. Duplicate selected, and then it's going to put that in a brand new folder. This is exactly what you want. You have these duplicated and they're saved, and now you don't touch them hopefully ever, because hopefully you never have to go back and revisit older work. So that's going to be the old version. We now change this to edit version 2 or MoGraph project version 2, whatever. You're going to be working off of here. This is going to be the same one that you've been working off of, but we've saved kind of where we were at before. And then here, this is going to be referencing all that current stuff. So go back to After Effects, and here we are. So when it comes to the old version, then these are still going to be referencing that same footage. So the changes that you make for version 2 are going to be reflected in this version 1 composition. And that's just the nature of how it works. If you do need to go back, you'll need to import those old compositions and re-add them into here. But the ideal is you would never need to rebuild your version 1 from the bottom like that. So It's just an emergency just in case. It's a lot of work just for making sure that you don't lose work. But if you've ever lost work, then you know how valuable that is. Always do sound effects for motion graphics projects. Whooshes, swishes, risers, reverse risers. You just reverse the clip, hits, any sort of like ambient sound. If you have live action footage, you know, if it's a circus or a fairgrounds or a convention, an event, you know, audience cheering, just ambient kind of event sounds, voices in like an echoey space, things like that. Always use them. The one other thing is if you started in Premiere and you go into After Effects, you're going to have, that's what I did for this one to show for this example. You're going to have all these compositions that are a different length. And, you know, maybe I actually want this one to extend out and I can't. You got to go into After Effects, change the length of the composition. But if I wanted that flexibility for all of them, how would I do that without having to individually go into each composition and change that? Well, I can select all of my compositions, and I think this is a free script on AE Scripts, but it's a RD comp sitter, and you can change the duration of your compositions. So if I wanted them all to be 15 seconds long, I can, that'll change all of your compositions to be 15 seconds long. So then I go back into here and I can change all of the lengths of all of my compositions, and I have a lot more flexibility there. So that's a really useful tool. Another thing too is these are alpha. These have the alpha channel on them because there's no background. So if I put those up a level and bring in a background, that's not gray, then that shows up underneath. So that works for live action footage or whatever you want to do. And that's where I'm going to end it. I really appreciate you watching. I hope that you got something useful out of it. If you did, feel free to subscribe. If you have any tips, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.